Okay, so let's talk value. And I'm not talking about value-based pricing. You can ask Chris about that. I'm talking about the lightness and brightness of a color. On a scale of black to white, how bright is a color? And then how does that affect how we perceive it? As you can see, each color has a unique inherent value, or brightness. Now, by nature, we perceive some colors brighter and some darker. But let's look at this in more practical terms. Here's an illustration of mine. It's using green, blue, yellow, and a touch of red. Now, I can see what's going on, but it's really tough to focus on any one thing. My eyes are just wandering around the image kind of aimlessly. Now, you might find yourself in a similar situation, where your colors just don't look right and you're not quite sure why. Whenever I find myself here, I stop and do a value check. This is a super handy trick that I use all the time in my own work. Now, let's look at this again, but in just black and white values. So in order to do that, what we're going to do, and I'm using Photoshop here, we're going to go to the layers panel, and then we're going to go all the way down to the bottom here where you have this like row of icons. We're going to click the little circle guy and go up to hue saturation and then click that. So that'll create a new hue and saturation adjustment layer, and just make sure that it's at the very, very top of the layer stack. So it should be above everything else. And under the properties tab of that hue and saturation layer, if we have it selected here, okay, I want you to find saturation, and right now it should say 0. But we want to look at this in black and white so we can check out the value. So we're going to take the saturation tab and we're going to slide it all the way to the left here to -100. And now our image should be in black and white. And look at that. It's just a big kind of gray blob, and there's no contrast whatsoever. So this is tough to look at in black and white because there's like no white, there's no dark. It's just kind of bleh, just gray. So I'm really not surprised that this doesn't look very good in color. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Greg, this is a course about color. What's with all the black and white? And I get it. It seems counterintuitive, right? The thing is, contrast and value are just as important as hue and saturation. And here's a great example of why that is. This is a revised version of the illustration. Easier on the eyes, right? Now let's do another value check. So much better. Wow, look at all that contrast. So now you can see that there are very dark parts, very bright parts, and plenty of shades of gray in between. And go ahead and insert your own 50 Shades of Grey joke here. I know you want to. Now I scooched some of the hues around by a little bit, but the biggest difference between these two images is value. And you can clearly see that when you do a value check. As you can see, value can make or break how colors work together. My general rule of thumb is that if it doesn't look good in black and white, chances are it's not going to look much better in color. So if you ever find yourself in a color predicament like this, do a value check. It's your friend. Now, value becomes exponentially more important when you're dealing with typography, especially on screens. By no stretch of the imagination is this a typography course, although we do offer a great one if you're interested. But I do want to take a moment and just highlight why you should pay extra close attention about how color, type, and value work together. Here's one of my favorite quotes. It's a great quip, but damn, that is hard to read. The colors just seem to vibrate against each other, and it's really kind of tough to focus on. So let's make an adjustment to the value and see what happens. Much better. When considering color for typography, your top priority should always be legibility. Because if you can't read it, or if you strain reading it, then who cares what color it is? And speaking of straining, I'm a big fan of dark mode. Don't at me, okay? But when you're reading pure white over a pure black background, that can put a lot of strain on your eyes. But if we soften the black a touch and dull the white ever so slightly, this Wikipedia article about chilaquiles becomes much more enjoyable to read. All right, so now, hopefully, you understand the value of value. And it's time for some homework. So here's what we're gonna do. I want you to start by opening a project of yours. Now it could be old, it could be new, you could still be working on it, it doesn't matter. Just make sure it uses more than one color. So then you're gonna open that in Photoshop or whatever it is you're using, And I want you to do your own value check on it. Next, I want you to go into each layer and start adjusting the values. Think about where you want the most contrast and where you want the eye to focus. And while you do this, be sure and toggle the hue and saturation layer so you can see what's going on with the color. Lastly, I want you to give yourself a pat on the back. Because hey, you are already better with color than when you started. So good job. Okay, if you don't have your own project to work on, you can download my example file in this module and start playing with the values to see how it works on your own. Okay? Have fun.